All right, so I just want to briefly go over some of these presets before we move forward with the course, because if you are a beginner and at any point you feel lost as to how to set up a simulation, these presets are actually a really good starting point. I would say that the fire sims are not that great, but for example, the explosion is pretty nice, the large scale smoke is nice, the cigarette smoke is pretty good. So what you would do is just give it an object to work with. So you would just start by, again, maybe making a sphere. And then as soon as you have an object selected, you can just click on the preset and it will automatically create a source like we did before. And it automatically makes the sphere the source. And then there's a turbulence helper just to give the fire some random movement. So the way to create turbulence is to go under helpers, Phoenix FD, and you can create a PHX turbulence here, just so you know where that is. So at this point, basically, it's just drag and drop. So you would just hit start, and it will create a basic fire simulation for you. So I'm running the fire simulation preset, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's not entirely bad. This is definitely a good way to just sort of go into the settings and look at what they did. We have the adaptive grid, as I explained in the previous lesson, happening here. And then you can look at what dynamic settings they did. So they have some cooling here, which basically just makes the fire die off sooner. So the higher the cooling, the sooner the fire basically dies. And they're doing 2 steps per frame because the fire is moving pretty fast. And for the method, they're doing buffered. So buffered is actually the best conservation method for something like a small scale fire. It'll give you the nicest detail. So again, we're gonna cover all of these in the project-based lessons later on, but just something to pay attention to. So again, if at any point you're sort of just lost as to, man, I really just wanna do a basic fire, and I can't remember how to do that, you can always just refer back to the presets here and use that as your starting point. So this example is the temperature-based fire. So let me just delete that for now. And I'm gonna create the fuel-based fire next and just run the simulation. So the way this works is basically the source is emitting fuel. It's not emitting temperature and it's not emitting smoke, because fuel as it burns will actually generate its own temperature, and as it burns out it will also generate its own smoke. So that's the main difference compared to the previous example where we were basically just emitting temperature and smoke. So as you can see, the fuel burns, and as it burns we're generating some smoke. And all of the fuel settings are controlled under the fuel tab. So here you can control how much smoke you're generating. You can control the energy, which is basically how much it expands. So again, I'm gonna explain all of these settings in the later examples, but just wanna show you what these presets look like. So here we actually still have the temperature-based fire, and this one is the fuel-based fire. So these are the 2 presets here. Next up would be the explosion. The explosion is actually pretty nice. So again, I'm just gonna select the sphere and click on this explosion sim, and it'll run the script and create everything for me. And I'm just gonna run the simulation to show you what that looks like. So I'm running the simulation, and I would say out of all of these fire and smoke presets, the explosion preset is probably the nicest. This is actually a pretty nice explosion that you can easily modify to fit into your shot and whatever you need to do. So basically the outgoing velocity is animated from 58 meters to go all the way down to 0 over 5 frames, and that creates the initial burst, and then it just slowly dissipates based on the other settings. So the way to look at these is these are basically project files. And Chaos Group is actually calling them quick start simulations, right? So that's exactly what this is that it gives you. It's a quick start to get you started, and then you can go in and modify some of these settings but you can skip the initial steps of setting up the source and the grid and all that. It gives you something that's pretty nice to start with. So one thing to point out, this is the temperature-based explosion. So like I was telling you before, with the fuel, you would just check fuel and uncheck smoke and temperature because fuel generates its own temperature and smoke. But in this explosion case, we are generating a temperature of 2000. So basically the hottest points here are 2000 degrees. And then the temperature slowly decreases until basically the fire is gone. And we're generating smoke on top of that with a value of 1. So next, I'm gonna run the fuel explosion to show you the difference. All right, so I'm running this setup gasoline explosion preset. So as you can see, basically a bunch of fuel is emitted first, and that fuel then ignites, and it creates a different style of explosion than what we had before. So if I pause this, you can see we still have the cache here for the temperature-based explosion, which was this one. And then coming up here is the fuel-based one. So the beginning of it looks different. Basically, this one is probably more realistic because this is what would happen in the real world. All right, so a few frames forward, this is what the fuel explosion looks like. So I'm gonna show you how to set this up from scratch, because even though this preset is pretty good, it's still important that you know how to set this up from scratch if you need to, so you understand how everything works. But again, the preset is there to get you started if you need to. So I'm not gonna go over all of them. You know, you can definitely play around. We have the large scale smoke preset here, which is pretty good. The cigarette smoke, the candle fire is very nice. And then these clouds here, even though we're gonna set up clouds in this course in a different way than they are set up here, but the preset is here for you if you want to check that out. And then the rest of them are liquid simulation presets, which we're not gonna go over in this course. All right, so I just wanted you guys to be aware that these presets are here and they are helpful, and some of them look pretty cool. So definitely look around, play around with these, and I'll see you in the next lesson.